become Yngwie Malmsteen's manager. How did that happen?
All right. Well, like obviously, from the time I started to try to learn how to play guitar, obviously I was a fan of Yngwie. Also Paul Gilbert, the classic '80s group of shredders, Vinnie Moore, that whole group.
The shrapnel thing, yeah.
Shrapnel thing, yeah. And that I still like the Clapton and the Hendrix, but that new shredding style caught my eye and my ear. But Yngwie used to have a fan club before the days the internet really took off. It was one of those, I think it was called Dragon's Fire.
Dragon's Fire, I think that's what it was.
Ann Petty, Ann Petty ran it. She was the president, and she did all the interviews. And like you said, before the internet, that was when you had newsletters that came out every quarter and that sort of thing. I started helping Ann with the newsletter because they had technical questions for Yngwie about what kind of tubes do you use, what kind of amplifiers do you use, what kind of effects pedals. I mean, everybody knows this stuff now. If you take yourself back to 1991 or whatever, 1993, 1995, 1996, that time period, and you didn't have Google and the internet really that widespread, people were still vague about equipment. So I would, I'd write those articles for her. And so through her, I met Yngwie in person.
Okay. So what was that first meeting like? I'm going to go down the rabbit hole with you here.
Okay. All right.
What was this first meeting like? And I'm going to back up for a quick minute. So Ann, how was that connection? How did that actually happen?
To totally be honest, I don't remember how I got to helping Ann Petty with the newsletter. I gotta be honest, and I can't remember how she and I used to just be a fan that got the newsletter.
Right.
I don't recall how she and I actually started writing and helping her.
Okay.
I do remember somehow I started writing the technical corner.
Okay. So you were handling part of,
there's a little
the technical part of the
newsletter. There was a second. She would deal with talking with Yngwie and interviewing him. And then there was the technical part about what kind of strings do you use? What kind of tubes do you use in your amp? And whatever.
Right.
And Ann didn't know much about that, but I knew that. So I could say, well, I know what he uses. I could help write that, or I could help explain that.
Okay.
And then she said, well, you actually live close to him. I said, well, yeah. Well, you could help me a lot with the newsletter then.
Wow.
So then what happened was, now I remember the first meeting, though. That's not I remember. She came down to do an interview with him and said, hey, I'm going to be coming down to South Florida, and you've been helping me with the newsletter. Would you like to meet Yngwie at dinner? And I said, well, sure. And at that time, DOD, because I've also worked with some equipment manufacturers, DOD had just reissued their 250 pedal, the yellow DOD 250 overdrive pedal.
The yellow one, yeah.
It had been out of circulation or out of production for a couple of years. They had just reissued it.
Okay.
Well, I had one because obviously I was trying to learn how to play like my heroes, and I think it might have been close to Yngwie's birthday too. So I thought, well, I'm going to meet this guy for the first time. I probably shouldn't show up empty-handed. So I got a second DOD 250 pedal because I didn't know what else to get the guy. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, he's probably already got 100 of them, but hey, it's brand new, whatever.
Right.
But he was actually surprised because he did not know that DOD was reissuing them again. He was still using his old ones. So we met that night, and it was at a Mexican restaurant down in Miami. And at that time, he was still married to his first wife, Amber.
Amber Dawn.
Amber Dawn, yeah.
He was still married to Amber Dawn. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
And we seemed to hit it off pretty good. One thing I will say about Yngwie, though, is he's not the kind of guy that's super sociable with a big cluster of friends that hang around. So it's not you never seem to be that kind of friend. It's a very closed knit family or whatever. So it's not like he's got a big group of buddies that he's hanging around with on a friendly basis.
Right.
So after we hit it off pretty well, and we really said he would call from time to time and invite me down to go out to the favorite Mexican restaurant, play around in the studio some, and ask my opinion on songs he was working on. But it wasn't that often. It might have been once every 3 months. So you could say we developed a friendship, but it wasn't like your real close buddy friendship where you're talking and hanging around every day of the week or something.
Okay, so I'm going to back up a little bit here. So you meet Yngwie for the first time in this Mexican restaurant, and as you said, it's not like he's got this entourage, but it's kind of tight knit. What was the conversation like? This is what I'm fascinated by. Like, you're sitting across. Let's just say, and I could be wrong. I wasn't there. You're sitting across from the table from Yngwie Malmsteen. What was the conversation? What was it?
Well, first of all, Ann said happy birthday to him and all that, and then introduced me, and I gave him the DoD 250 pedal.
Okay.
And he looked at it, and he says, this looks new. And I said, well, it is. DoD's just started reissuing them. And he's like, well, fuck, I didn't know that. And
that's a dead-on impersonation. That was awesome.
And so where'd you find it, and how did you know about it? And we talked about that. And then he was asking, how do I know Ann Petty? And I said, I'd been helping with the fan club. And that was really about the limit of most of our conversation. There may be other, because then Ann had a lot of questions for the upcoming newsletter, where she had like a long list of like 15 questions.
Okay.
But at the end of the night, he said, hey, you're okay. What's your number? You live around here, huh? Well, maybe we'll get together from time to time.
Wow.
We swapped phone numbers that night. And like I said, that led into not an ongoing regular thing, but out of the blue, I'd say about once every 3 months or so, I'd get the call, hey, what are you doing? Or, hey, I'm going to be up your way. Why don't you meet me at, there's another Mexican restaurant. It's out of business now up here. I'm trying to remember what it was called. South of the border.
Okay.
You like to go to. And so, like I said, 3 or 4 times a year, we'd meet up that way.
All right. So there was definitely an impact. There was certainly something there.
Yeah.
So at what point and where did Yngwie Malmsteen turn to you and say, you gotta take over. You gotta manage me, because that's the thing. You became Yngwie's manager, and I'm going to preface this whole part of this interview to the listeners and the viewers is that Michael Spitzer is absolutely the one dude that is responsible for bringing Yngwie back into the public consciousness. It's not even an argument. It's just the way it is. And I want to talk to you about this because you were instrumental in bringing him back in a very amazing way. So,
well, I thank you for that. Sometimes I figure it's been 20 years ago, so I figure sometimes that might be forgotten in history there, but I appreciate that. Now, what happened was, it was one of those times when he called and said, hey, are you doing anything tomorrow? And I said, why, what's up? He says, well, why don't y'all come on down? We'll shoot some pool, go out to dinner. And by then, of course, I should mention, he had April, the new wife.
Right. He had now since remarried.
Yeah. And I said, in between then, I had been at his wedding. The only people when he married April, it was the fan club president, Ann Petty, 2 or 3 other friends, April's family, and my wife and I were really that was the whole group at the wedding. And so he was already married to April. And so we met at I think it was an Indian restaurant in Miami. And he knew about my business. We knew we were from 2 separate worlds, so to speak. His world is 100% the world of music and Yngwie Malmsteen. And of course, so sometimes it would get awkward because he'd say, what do you do again? And I start explaining like I did to you earlier, because environmental chemistry is an oddity. The average everyday person, it's not the kind of career or something that's in the forefront. So
Okay.
it's kind of hard to describe to somebody, so you could tell there was a little little wall or disconnect between us because our worlds are so different.
Right.
Uh, but we were talking but he knew I was in business. And so that night at that restaurant, he said, "Let me ask you something. I think my manager may be ripping me off. Would you mind looking at some paperwork?" So he gave it to me, and over dinner, I started looking at it.
Wow.
And, so in between eating, I'm reading and reading. And I looked up at him and I said, "Don't take what I'm saying as 100%. I might be wrong. You really need an accountant to look this over. But from what I'm seeing, it looks like, for example, you're supposed to be making 80% of the money and the manager's making 20%. I got news for you."
It's the other way around.
I said, "Your suspicion seems to be true. It looks like, he's ripping you."
Wow.
I said, "But that's just me taking one glance over one dinner. If you want to know the truth, you really need to dig into this deep with a good accountant." He said, "Well, I've already had an accountant look at it, and he says everything's fine." And I said, "Well, who's the accountant?" "Well, it's the one I've had for years." I said, "Well, let me guess. The manager hired him." He says, "Yeah." "Forget it. No, 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 no. I'll get you an accountant that's not involved with the music business, that does not know you, does not know any of the parties involved, and give you a totally impartial analysis." And so
Wow.
he took that recommendation, and after about, I don't know, a month and a half, that accountant finished a study, and he came back and says, "Hey, Yngwie, you got a problem. The manager's been taking 85% and leaving
Oh
you
my
50."
God. Oh my God.
So Yngwie's suspicions were correct.
Whew.
So then at a subsequent dinner, he and April were there, and he said, "I have a serious question for you. Would you consider acting as my manager?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm honored because, I started being a fan of yours, and now to be helping the artist I was a fan of on a business sense is pretty neat. It's like coming full circle in a way."
Yeah,
I said,
no, it's
"With you, I'm not from the music world. The music business is based on contacts and internal politics, like any
yeah.
industry. You get into
Yeah.
any industry, it's got its own politics, its own network of backslapping, and it's everywhere." I said, "So I'm afraid I would fail you because,
Mm,
who do I know at Polygram Records? Who do I know at MTV? Who do I know at any of these places? Uh,
right.
I'm afraid. I mean, I'd like to do it. I'm honored, but I'm afraid I'm not the right guy for the job. You need some heavy hitter." And he says, "The problem is," he says, "Well, Mike, here's the problem. I've had 3 heavy hitters, and I've been ripped off
And
twice.
they all ripped them off. Right.
The only manager that treated me good was the one that died, I think, of cancer or something, one of his early managers.
Who, Andy
Now,
Truman?
I don't
Are we
recall.
going? Yeah, that would be going back. Andy
My
Truman.
history there is vague, but that's what he said to me. So I only had one manager who treated me right, and he died of cancer. Now, that was his perspective. I don't know in hindsight if that was an
Okay.
accurate statement or not.
Right.
But the long story short was he had not had good success with the real managers in the industry.
Yeah.
Um, so then what we just said was, "Well, tell you what." He says, "I have to do something. I have just fired my management. When your accountant came to me with these findings, I immediately fired the manager. So I have nobody now. I've lost my record contract in the United States." And there were some other things. You're right. He was at kind of a low point right there. So we agreed after going back and forth that I would be an interim manager until he could find somebody that he could trust. So that's how I stepped in at that point.
All right. So you step in, and one of the things that I remember from this era of time was that there was this almost resurgence of Yngwie Malmsteen. So were you the one that put him on the press junket that he did, national, like throughout the states, I should say, stateside, where he was doing different interviews. He did the interview with Eddie Trunk, but it was really a press junket. It was your way of getting him out there and saying, you need to reconnect with your audience just on a verbal level, So that was you, right?
Well, indirectly, yes. And what happened was, like I said a minute ago, I was a little intimidated, even though I had success in my own business world.
Okay.
Like I said earlier in the interview, my own company that I knew that industry, we had taken from a ground start to being the largest of its kind in the state of Florida in 7 years and putting out of businesses doing the same thing that had been around for 30, including my prior.
Right.
I knew that world, but this was a world I didn't really know.
Okay.
So I went into it a little intimidated, but I also was a fan, so I wanted to do my best to make sure. It's like it'd be great to say, "Hey, I'm a fan, but I could be the guy that could help stop the plane from going down and bring it back up."
Right.
So I looked at it, and I did apply some of the same business principles I'd used in my own business, which is innovate, don't imitate, don't just do what everybody else does. Try to do something different.
Oh, that's interesting.
So the first thing I tried to do was he had just had a new album come out exactly at that moment that I had nothing to do with except the artwork. The first thing I did for Yngwie, just so you'll know, the first job I did was the artwork for War to End All Wars.
And War to End All Wars. Okay, yeah.
And that people.
Which, by the way, I apologize for interrupting here, but this is one of the few records that does not have Yngwie's face on the cover.
And that was intentional. That was my suggestion.
Okay.
I said earlier about doing things different. The first thing he said to me was, "Hey, I have to deliver this album to Pony Canyon Records in 3 weeks. I'm obligated. Wow. I don't have any artwork or whatever." Jim Lewis used to handle that, the prior manager. Okay. He says, "I don't know what I'm going to do." So I said, "Can I make one suggestion?" And he says, "All right." I said, "Let's not put your face on the cover." And he didn't say anything bad or good. He just looked at me and I said, "Here again, I'm going to try different things, Yngwie. Every single cover you've done since the beginning has had you on it. There's nothing wrong with that, but you've already done that several times.
Right.
Let's go with a theme instead." So we tried to commission some original artwork, but nobody could work that fast. Then also, Pony Canyon Records only had limited money they'd given us for artwork budget. So, I started listening to the songs, and like I said, it had already been mixed, it had already been mastered. It was what it was. I had hesitations about the production quality, but I think most people did.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
It was done. I mean, the music was in the can. It was done. It was just waiting for the artwork packaging. Okay. So that's when, like I told you earlier, I used to like to read a lot. So I grew up with the Doc Savage and the Shadow, Conan the Barbarian. So that's when I started thinking.
Yeah, it's so interesting you brought that up because I'm thinking, is there a connection here?
So I thought, wait a minute, War to End All Wars. We need some kind of battle scene. So
it's almost like a Boris. It's almost like a Boris cover.
Well, actually, it's Frank Frazetta is who it is.
Okay, is it Frank?
Frank Frazetta did a lot of that cover artwork in the 80s and 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So I contacted the estate of Frank Frazetta. His son was managing Frank Frazetta's artwork, and we negotiated, at the 11th hour with the clock ticking for that artwork. Given more time, we might have done something more original. But I thought two things. Frank Frazetta is a famous artist. Mm-hmm. You've never had a famous artist. I mean, Trilogy has nice artwork, but it was like a famed artist.
Right.
So I said, well, and
it wasn't iconic.
Right. Some people may recognize the Frank Frazetta style.
Yeah.
And so it was like, hey, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it could be Molly Hatchet may have had Frank Frazetta do artwork.
See, I was going to ask you that because I was confused because I have the Tarzan collection.
Yeah.
With the artwork and I don't know why I confused this, but I think I did. I thought that was he also the Edgar Rice Burroughs covers.
Yeah.
Which I thought was always Boris.
I think they're both. I think
you think
I'm not sure. I have to go back in my book collection and look. But in between Tarzan and Conan and that whole series,
right?
In between the two, both Frank Frazetta and Boris did artwork, but I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're all
when I look at War to End All Wars, that's what that takes me to. It takes me to, the Tarzan covers, the Molly Hatchet covers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and production aside of that record,
right.
it's the best Yngwie album cover ever.
Well, it's different. I won't necessarily take credit for saying it's the best, but the idea was, ride the coattails of Frank Frazetta. I mean, people look at this and go, whoa, you've got a famed artist doing the cover work now.
Right.
It just throws a different angle on it to draw attention. Yeah. Also, what you brought up was a big topic of conversation. If you were to look at the bulletin boards, like I said, we didn't have our Facebook and whatever back in that time period, 1999 or whatever, but you had blog sites, you had bulletin boards. It was a big topic of discussion. Hey, look at Yngwie's new album cover. It did what it was supposed to do, which was it broke the norm, caught people's attention.
Yeah.
But Yngwie still wanted to appear on the album cover, of course, because he's the primary artist. So he wanted to pose in a suit of armor, holding a sword, to match the front cover. The problem was the suit of armor that he has at his house doesn't fit him. It's actually, he's if you've ever seen interviews with him, he has a couple of suits of armor at his house, but they're more for display, not for wearing.
Right.
So we tried to, here again, quickly find a film production company here in South Florida that might have gladiator type armor or whatever to wear. If we were out in California, we probably could have pulled it off. But at that time here in South Florida, there's like the Glades and I don't know, silk stockings, maybe, I don't know, whatever it was in production down here. There was nobody that had suits of armor in South Florida in wardrobe. So what happened was Rich Da Silva, who did all the artwork for Spitfire Records, had to Photoshop the armor and sword onto just a picture of Yngwie. So it didn't come out perfect. If you look close, you can say, well, this looks Photoshopped, and it was. But here again, given more time, and if we could have gotten a real suit of armor, that was the story on.
Did you ever have to say no to him? Did you ever have to say, hey, Yngwie, here's a word you might not have heard? No.
Well, not in that manner, but I'll be honest. People have asked this question in other interviews over the years.
Okay.
It's one of two things. I was either fortunate. Well, it could be three things. One I'm saying humorously. Right off the bat, there seemed to be a mutual respect. People talk about the harsh Yngwie ego. And I will be honest with you, I did see it in terms of his relationship with other musicians like Matzo Lawson and others.
Okay.
Where you see that rough edge. I never experienced it with myself. Right off the bat, there seemed to be a mutual respect, almost like he looked at me like an older brother in a way.
Okay.
Never raised the voice to me at ever. Now, some people jokingly say, yeah, you're too big.
I'm not messing with that guy. I'm not going to mess with him.
But that's just the joke part. But right off the bat, it was like that. And so, for example, they might be at a rehearsal and he'd stop playing and yell over at Matzo Lawson something like, damn it, we're playing in Phrygian, not Aeolian. That should have been an F, not an F sharp. What the hell's wrong? And
right.
Kick a speaker over, which is like, okay, that's not called for. Come on. And so that did exist. I mean, so there's some truth to that. But then he turned right around to me and say, do you think we should do that song second or third in the set? So it was interesting with me, or he called me up late at night, which was the only thing that ever irritated my wife about him. Was, the phone, because she's a nurse and she has to work these long hours.
Right.
His phone would ring at 3 a.m. because he's a night owl. And he'd be saying, hey, I got this idea for a new riff for a song. I want you to listen and see what you think. Now you got to remember, he's playing it in the studio through a landline phone.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here. So all I'm really hearing, through a telephone is, it's like, I think it sounds good. I can't tell.
So that was a dynamic that you two had. I
Right.
think he had a dynamic with you, which I
So to
think
answer your question, there are several times I'd say, I didn't say it in that manner of no. I'd say, let's stop and think about this a minute. I don't think this is the smartest or most logical thing to do, and here's why.
okay.
And sit there and explain if we this, and if we do this, we're going to be in this direction. If we do this, You've tried this for years. This ain't worked. Let's try it this way.
All right.
And that worked.
Yeah, and you did. You had a lot of success with him. I mean, as I said earlier, you put Yngwie Malmsteen back on the map. You did. It you know, we were talking about before the interview where, I was backstage with Satriani back in the 90s, and there was no way they were going to put him on the G3 tour. And then you come into the picture, get him out there reacquainting with the public and all this stuff, with you, whether it's the record, all that stuff. I think it was more the junket you put him on, which is like, get out there, do some interviews, start talking to people.
Well, that's part of it, but I'm going to be honest. A lot of that wasn't him. A lot of it was his past manager. Because you got to remember, as the artist, he himself was not personally talking with promoters and whatever. They were all dealing with the past management. And the other thing that I faced right off the bat, and I realized it was going to be an uphill battle, I was literally trying to set up a tour for War to End All Wars. And this is no exaggeration. Here again, remember, I'm also learning this industry as I go. So, in hindsight, I can see where I made some miscalculations and mistakes just simply because you're trying to manage Yngwie Malmsteen in the music business, just dropping in at the moment a new album's coming out. So you're learning the industry, negotiating new record contracts, and trying to set up a world tour all at the same time that you're learning the industry. So I can see some mistakes. Overall, I'll be honest, to blow my own horn, I'm proud of what I accomplished, but in hindsight, knowing what I know now, I probably would have done certain things different.
Okay.
But you had to really just hit the ground running, so to speak.
Right.
But when I started calling companies to try to set up a tour, I'm going to be honest with you, I was getting people just lashing out at me and hanging up the phone.
Wow.
I mean, literally. But this is not a direct reflection of Yngwie, because it was a direct reflection of the management. Apparently, his management really was abrasive and ran a lot and rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Wow.
I remember one call, I was trying to set up a tour, and as you alluded to, we eventually for that tour had him in countries he'd never been in before, and it ended up actually being one of the largest tours of his entire career.
Wow.
For the War album, as far as the number of countries visited and number of sites, so that was good. But I literally remember some of the early calls I'd make. Hello, I want to introduce myself. My name is Michael Spitzer. I'm replacing Yngwie Management's former management company. Who? And I said, who are you representing? And I said, Yngwie. Oh, fuck you.
Oh my God.
And that's literally, that's what I ran into. And I would call back and I said, excuse me. I said, I'm the new management. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a little rough. I shouldn't have hung up on you like that. Go ahead. Finish. And I said, wow. I don't know the past history. I'm coming in here now. And I'm trying to, fix things. But I can definitely tell there's a bad experience there or bad feelings. Can you tell me why it's so bad? And they would then relate to me relationships or problems they had with the past management.
Okay.
So we had to overcome that so that any of the booking agents would even talk to us about setting up a tour. And there was a lot of hesitation. And some of them went into some of the details, but a lot of them were, I guess, for professional liability practices, would not go into a lot of details.
Okay.
Just to say, we had a lot of troubles with that past management.
That's wild.
And we've kind of sworn that we would never work with Yngwie again, as you experienced when you talked to Satriani at the G3 tour. That was lingering bad effects we had to overcome from the prior management.
Right. So it wasn't Yngwie. It's the management. It was the management at the time.
Right. Because obviously the artist Yngwie was never talking to booking companies.
Right. No, he was
handling all that.
He was playing his guitar and yelling at Mats.
Yeah.
Who I knew very well. Mats and I were very good friends. We talked on the phone regularly. God rest his soul.
Yes, there's no surprise to you then.
Yeah, he's just a beautiful person. But yeah, that's interesting. That's such a great insight that, like you were talking about, so it's kind of a funky thing where everyone's like, oh, it's Yngwie. It's like, well, it's not always Yngwie. There's other people involved. But you came in and you you put him back out into the world, and his trajectory from that point, you know, he's back, he has been, he's constantly doing his thing.
Well, that's
So
some of the other things we did different in that regard. For example, when you talked about the press junket, that was done in coordination with Spitfire Records, Paul Bebo and the gang at Spitfire Records. If you remember,
Okay.
I don't even think Spitfire's around anymore, but at that time, Spitfire was doing re-releases of Alice Cooper. They were managing Ronnie James Dio, Zakk Wylde, Sebastian Bach, I think.
Okay.
And that looked like a good match for Yngwie. And they were they were energetic at that time. And so I approached, because at this point in time, Yngwie had no U.S. label. If you were an American fan of Yngwie, you had to buy
right.
a Canyon import.
Yep.
You had to buy an import. So I said, one of our first things, we have to get you an American label back. So, using the typical business approaches of trying to negotiate contracts, we finally got Spitfire interested. But if you notice, for Spitfire, they did not just release the War to End All Wars and do a video for Crucify, the song Crucify. They also did the back catalog of Pony Canyon records that had never been released in the United States before.
That's right. Facing the Animal was one of them.
And we did all of them. Seventh Sign.
The
Orchestra Concerto.
Concerto in E flat minor.
Inspiration was one of them. Basically, I think there's 6 or 7 of them. Actually.
Yeah, there was a bunch.
And they were all done with new artwork. Now, the artwork was not stellar. Here again, you got to think of the situation where, as you know, Yngwie had dropped a couple of notches on the ladder at that time. And so to bring him back, the labels had a limited amount of money they were willing to invest. So I've heard some people, we didn't want to release the American versions with the exact same artwork that Pony Canyon was using. As a matter of fact, we couldn't. Pony Canyon wouldn't let us.
Right. Yeah.
We first tried that. As a matter of fact, I haven't thought about some of these stories in 20 years. I mean, my memory is but Pony Canyon would not allow us to use so that was probably good, because then we were forced to do something different.
Yep.
And even though some of the artwork on the Spitfire re-releases is nothing amazing, for people who are collectors, it gave them something else to add to the collection, another version. And so we did the re-releases, got him a new record contract. Spitfire did the new music video, and they helped set up a lot of the press interview stuff.
Okay.
Now, the other thing I realized when I asked them was, how much money do we have for marketing and promotion? And it was a very small amount. So I quickly realized it's going to be hard to impact the market too much with a small budget. So that's when I said, well, the other thing we have to do then is let's try to start working on some more endorsement deals or other things to get your name out there that don't necessarily require money. So if you remember, this really affects guitar players more than the general public.
Okay.
But any kind of fan's a good fan. So this is the same time period that you'd have seen ads from Celestion with Yngwie promoting the Celestion G12.
Yeah, I remember those. Yeah.
That's also when Harman Music Group and DoD released the first ever signature overdrive pedal they'd ever done in their history, which was the 308 overdrive pedal.
Yeah, I think I have one
that was
right
the
here.
First one. And JJ, the former Tesla factory, it used to be in Czechoslovakia, but now is JJ Tubes in Slovakia.
Okay.
Did the posters and all the stuff for Yngwie using JJ Tubes. And it wasn't fake. He really was using them, because they were shipping them over by the box loads.
Okay.
He was using Sovtech tubes or something before that.
Yeah.
And switched to JJ Tubes, which, in my opinion, are better for the most part, because they're from the old Tesla factory that was bombed during the war.
Mm-hmm.
They started up under the name JJ. And Tesla tubes were the great ones back in the day.
Okay.
So my idea there was, it's only the music world. It's not the general population, but still, it's a way of getting the name out. You haven't really been seeing the guy much. You haven't heard much. So now we've got an American label. Now we're re-releasing to the American audience the last 6 or 7 albums you couldn't buy before unless you wanted to pay $45 for an import.
Right.
Now all of a sudden in the guitar magazines, you're showing up for Celestion, for JJ Tubes, a new pedal with your name on it. it was like, let's get a lot of stuff going at one time to show this revitalization.
Right. So what you did was you went to him and said, you have to basically rebrand or rebrand your name to these companies, because that's going to bring people's attention.
Right.
Yeah, it was basically, you're rebranding. And that's kind of what you did. I mean, not kind of, it's what you did. You rebranded Yngwie Malmsteen and kind of brought it back, It was a beautiful thing.